Hi, I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome to another episode of Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we'll discuss how the assassination of Charlie Kirk is reverberating throughout Ohio. We'll also dig into union endorsements for the 2026 election, another teacher pension lawsuit, and the status of another lawsuit over foreign donations. Back in the studio today is Laura Bischoff.
Hi, Haley.
Hello. So we'll start off with Kirk. This discussion, unsurprisingly, will involve some difficult issues, so proceed with care. Kirk was shot and killed September 10th during an event at a Utah university, and officials in Ohio are still reeling. His death hit especially close to home for Vice President J.D. Vance, whom Kirk supported since Vance ran for Ohio Senate. Kirk's shooting was not the first case of political violence we've seen this year. In June, a gunman killed Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband and injured another Minnesota official. Ohio House and Senate leaders issued a joint statement calling for respectful dialogue and condemning the use of violence to make a political point. What other responses, reactions are we seeing from lawmakers here?
Yeah, so a couple of lawmakers, Republicans in the Ohio House, introduced a bill to make it so that those who commit violent crimes that were politically motivated could face an additional 10 years in prison. You know, this is part of kind of a trend in Ohio politics where they want to increase penalties for, various crimes and problems. They've also talked about maybe allowing judges and lawmakers to carry concealed weapons inside of courthouses and inside the Ohio State House. This is something that has been discussed before. As it is right now, I think lawmakers can take their guns into the State House garage, but have to lock them in their cars and they're not allowed to carry inside.
The thinking behind that bill kind of reminds me of the push to allow teachers in schools to carry concealed weapons. I think the thought there was that teachers should have a line of defense, essentially, as we continue to see violent incidents play out in schools.
Sure. I mean, we see school shootings and there's a lot of school districts, particularly rural school districts, that have decided to go ahead and arm school personnel. They don't have to tell us who's being armed or at what school buildings, but it's akin to the same thing as we see incidences of extreme political violence, that they want to be able to have the ability to respond right away.
Yeah. And going back to the legislation that increases penalties for politically motivated crimes, in the case of murder, the bill would impose at least a sentence of life in prison, and there would be the possibility of the death penalty in that case. And, right now there are various criteria for when the death penalty can be considered, but political violence, at least right now, is not on that list.
Right. It's a kind of a limited list on what can get you the death penalty, including premeditated murder, which, some of these political violence instances certainly seem premeditated.
Our next topic is the 2026 election, specifically union endorsements. When Sherrod Brown announced his Senate bid, he got a flurry of support from unions. This was not really surprising because Brown has long put unions and workers at the center of his policy agenda. But in a twist, some of these unions are also supporting Republican Vivek Ramaswamy for governor. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Ohio Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters decided to back Ramaswamy. And I think our colleague Jesse Balmer asked their leadership, what about Tim Ryan? He's a Democrat who's pro-labor, who's gotten their support in the past. What about him? And the answer was essentially, well, he's not in the race. He's sitting on the sidelines at this point, and they see the writing on the wall, and it reads to them is that Ramaswamy's going to be the next governor. And so it's just sort of interesting. Typically some of the trade unions backed by the builders, those are lean more Republican than Democrat, but the pipe fitters and some of the other trade unions tend to lean more Democrat. So it was an interesting split that happened.
Yeah, and we've even seen in the Senate race, Senator John Husted has picked up a couple union endorsements as well. I think part of this too is, you know, since Trump first ran for office, we've seen a shift among kind of the working class in terms of what kind of elected officials they're looking for. Some of them have really gravitated toward Trump and the movement he created, the style of Republican politics that he has defined the past few years. And I think sometimes you see a little bit of a split where union leaders may still largely support Democrats, but within the union membership themselves, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think Republicans have worked pretty hard over the last 14 years since John Kasich had the collective bargaining bill, Senate Bill 10, to kind of reach out to labor unions, particularly on promises of, avoiding Ohio becoming a right-to-work state.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was not here, but I get the sense there was a lot of damage done and a lot of repairing that needed to be done with Senate Bill 5. And
yeah, I mean, there were massive protests on the State House lawn. It was, it was put up for referendum, and they turned in well over the required number of signatures to get it to referendum. It went down hard. The voters did not like it. And I think that was a message to the Republican leadership.
In other union news, let's talk about teachers. 3 unions filed a lawsuit over a new state law that strips teachers' power to pick who serves on the board for the state teachers' retirement system. The change was added to the 2-year budget that passed over the summer. How will board members be chosen now?
Well, it's going to shift over a number of years starting September 30th under this new law that was in the budget. And it will shift the balance of power to appointed members and take away power from the retired teachers and the current teachers who are on the board. Right now, there's 7 teacher representatives on the board who are elected by the membership. And it's going to shift to a majority controlled by political appointees. This didn't sit well with the state teachers unions, the Ohio Education Association, the Federation of Teachers, the American Association of University Professors. They all joined forces and filed this lawsuit to challenge it. They did get a temporary restraining order, kind of putting a pin on that part of the law taking effect. And so we'll see how that proceeds. They're going to challenge it on 3 things. One is that only the state teachers' retirement system is targeted, and none of the other 4 public pension systems are facing this kind of change. And then also they say that it violates the constitutional requirement that bills address a single subject. Now, I've been covering the legislature for a long time, and I have seen a lot of bills that have more than one subject.
And a lot of lawsuits over those bills.
A lot of lawsuits. And also they are saying that the fact that it was inserted in the conference committee in the middle of the night into the budget bill, that failed the requirement that there be 3 readings of a bill. So a couple of, they're going after it on three different fronts.
It's interesting that this isn't happening with the other pension systems. Why do you think lawmakers decided to do this with STRS?
I think STRS has had a lot of controversy and chaos, huge management turnover, a kind of a turnover on who is on the board. The folks who've been elected by retirees and by teachers have been more aggressive on trying to get a return to a cost of living allowance and to restoring some benefits that were either lost or put on hold following the pension reform of 2012.
And one more thing before you go. An appeals court ruled this week that Ohio can ban green card holders and foreign nationals from donating to statewide issue campaigns. The ban came about after a dark money group that received money from a Swiss billionaire donated to the successful abortion rights amendment in 2023. I kind of doubt we've heard the last of this lawsuit.
Yeah, I agree.